Hi. Welcome back to The Rapture is Here and You Will Be Forcibly Removed from Your Home. I know in the last video I said that I wasn't really going to speak during this game, but I feel like in the last 20-something minute video you got a pretty good idea for how good the soundtrack in this game is. And maybe there was a little bit too much downtime between, story nodes, so if there's some time, I figure I might as well say a thing or two. Anyway, let's get started. So as you might have gathered from that first video, the narrative nodes, which is what I guess I'm calling them, are really color coordinated. That's a dumb use of that word. Anyway, the yellow ones are for The Shunned House by H.P. Lovecraft. All of the short stories that are read in this game are by H.P. Lovecraft. And I feel like I may have been somewhat remiss to start with The Shunned House, which is really the least thematically appropriate story for this game, because the cosmic horror aspects, which are pretty obvious, don't really come through in The Shunned House. I mean, it's a fun haunted house story, in the weird fiction kind of way that H.P. Lovecraft does, but really, it's not the best for this game. Now, the story nodes we'll be going to this time are for The Color Out of Space, which I believe are the best ones on display in this game. However, the first red node, which starts the story, is very far away, so the likelihood of someone experiencing this one first in the game is very low. That may be a choice on the developer's part to make the most thematically appropriate and most chilling story the one you encounter last. Now, it should be fairly obvious that I like this game a lot. Like, a lot. There's not much to it, but the atmosphere is incredible, the changing landscape, the soundtrack. It's so good. And it's a little bit of a walking simulator, but I'm perfectly okay playing a game where I just get to walk around a fairly pretty, rather nondescript location and have someone read, other than a few pronunciation mistakes in the readings, have people read to me stories which I love dearly. And it does take a while to get to this one, but it's worth it, I believe.
West of Arkham, the hills rise wild, and there are valleys with deep woods that no axe has ever cut. There are dark, narrow glens where the trees slope fantastically, and where thin brooklets trickle without ever having caught the glint of sunlight. On the gentler slopes there are farms, ancient and rocky, with squat, moss-coated cottages brooding eternally over old New England's secrets in the lee of great ledges. But these are vacant now, the wide chimneys crumbling and the shingled sides bulging perilously beneath low gambrel roofs. The old folk have gone away, and foreigners do not like to live here. French Canadians have tried it, Italians have tried it, the Poles have come and departed. It is not because of anything that can be seen or heard or handled, but because of something that is imagined. The place is not good for the imagination. It does not bring restful dreams at night. It must be this which keeps the foreigners away, for old Ammy Peace has never told them of anything he recalls from the strange days. When I went into the hills and vales to survey for the new reservoir, they told me the place was evil.
Now, it's in my opinion that the Color Out of Space reading in this game is one of the better readings of the material, maybe the best in this game. All of the voice acting, in my opinion, is pretty great, especially for the limited amount of time it took to make this game. Now, a legitimate worry with the color out of space is this game is locked to a 20-minute time limit. I believe on Game Jolt, when you download the game, the description is the world is going to end in 20 minutes. And with some of these stories, it's a bit of a task to get to all the nodes in the 20 minutes unless you hurry between them all, which seems a little unrealistic, but will do in this case. Anyway, the frame rate is dropping, and here's the next bit of story.
It all began, old Amy said, with the meteorite. Before that time, there had been no wild legends at all since the witch trials, and even these western woods were not feared half so much as the small island on the Miskatonic, where the devil held court beside a curious altar, older than the Indians. These were not haunted woods, and their fantastic dusk was never terrible till these strange days. Then there had come that white noontide cloud, that string of explosions in the air, and that pillar of smoke from the valley far in the wood. By night, all Arkham had heard of the great rock that fell out of the sky and bedded itself in the ground beside the well at the Nahum Gardner place. Nahum had come to town to tell people about the stone. They had dropped in on Amy Pierce's on the way. Amy was 40 then, and all the queer things were fixed very strongly in his mind. He and his wife had gone with 3 professors from Miskatonic University, who hastened on the next morning to see the weird visitor from unknown stellar space.
Another thing that I like about this game is that the nodes are placed in such a way that they're really tied to the story you're listening to. As you notice, of course, in the Shunned House, you return repeatedly to the ever-changing locale of the Shunned House, or a house, not necessarily the Shunned House. And in the Color Out of Space, there's a lot of woods and greenery and trees, and, well, you'll see.
They had uncovered what seemed to be the side of a large colored globule embedded in the substance. The color, which resembled some of the bands in the meteor's strange spectrum, was almost impossible to describe, and it was only by analogy that they called it color at all. Its texture was glossy, and upon tapping it, it appeared to premise both brittleness and hollowness. One of the professors gave it a smart blow with a hammer, and it burst with a nervous little pop. Nothing was emitted, and all trace of the thing vanished with the puncturing. It left behind a hollow, spherical space about 3 inches across, and all thought it probable that others would be discovered as the enclosing substance wasted away.
There's not much time before this next one, but that little bit goes into the kind of trope of H.P. Lovecraft's writing of taking concepts we know and describing them as indescribable, which leads to flights of fancy, which is quite enjoyable.
April brought a kind of madness to the country folk, and began that disuse of the road past Nahum's which led to its ultimate abandonment. It was the vegetation. All the orchard trees blossomed forth in strange colors, and through the stony soil of the yard and adjacent pastures there sprang up a bizarre growth, which only a botanist could connect with the proper flora of the region. No sane, wholesome colors were anywhere to be seen except in the green grass and leafage, but everywhere those hectic and prismatic variants of some diseased and underlying primary tone without a place among the known tints of the earth. Amy and gardeners thought that most of the colors had some sort of haunting familiarity, decided that they reminded one of the brittle globular of the meteor.
And here's a fine example of how, over time, the game world starts to change in these weird, simple, geometric shapes. You notice that, of course, during the Shunned House, but it happens differently depending on the nodes you pursue, which is really cool. In fact, what happens during the color out of space might be my favorite alteration to the game world, but the other ones are interesting as well. They're very seamless. They come out of nowhere as if they were always there in this weird, non-Euclidean space kind of thing. That's something we'll talk about later, actually, something I quite like about this game.
For over 2 weeks, Ami saw nothing of Nahum. And then, worried about what might have happened, he overcame his fears and paid the gardener place a visit. There was no smoke from the great chimney, and for a moment the visitor was apprehensive of the worst. The aspect of the whole farm was shocking. Grayish withered grass and leaves on the ground, vines falling in brittle wreckage from archaic walls and gables. Great bare trees clawing up at the gray November sky with a studied malevolence which Amy could not but feel had come from some subtle change in the tilt of the branches. But Nahum was alive after all. He was weak, lying on a couch in the low-ceiled kitchen.
So that thing I was going to talk about is, I think that this game does an exceptionally good job of touching on the aspects of H.P. Lovecraft's weird horror genre in a really incredible way. It takes the unknowable, cosmic, uncaring kind of thing that most people get wrong in games. It makes horror from things that are subtle but obvious. I quite like it.
Ami could not touch it, but looked horrified into the distorted parody that had been a face. What was it, Nahum? What was it? He whispered, and the cleft, bulging lips were just able to crack out a final answer.
Nothing. The color, it burns. Cold and wet, it burns. It lives in the well. I seen it. It can't smoke. Just like the flowers last night. Sucking life out of everything in that stone. It wants to come in that stone. Poison the whole place. Don't know what it is you want. The round thing, the college. The men from the college they dug out of the stone. They smashed it. It was the same color, just the same. Just like the flowers and the plants. It must have been more of them. Seeds that grew. I seen it the first time this week. Must have got a strong one times. He was a big boy, full of life. It beats down your mind, and then it gets you put it up again. In the world war. Don't worry about that. Evil one. Santa's never come back from the world. It can't get away. It drives you. You know something coming, but it ain't no use. I seen it come Santa again. It took Santa's when he was weak. Where's the again? My head's so good. I don't know how long I can feed up. It'll get it if we ain't careful. Just the color of the face. Just the color of a face. It's getting to heat that color towards night. It burns. It burns and it sucks. It comes from the same place as the war. And things like that out here. One of the professors said so. He was right. Adam, look out. He'll do something more. He'll suck your life.
But that was all. That which spoke could speak no more, because it had completely caved in. Ami laid a red check tablecloth over what was left and reeled out the back door into the fields.
I'm really not sure we're going to be able to get all of the story in this particular run, and if we don't, I'll scrap the recording because there's really no point. But it is kind of annoying how far apart these red nodes are. I like that they all skirt the trees and lead you through these interesting little vignettes of abandoned buildings. It's quite nice. I feel like I'm praising this game too much, but really, for the amount of effort that went into it, I don't think any praise is too high.
There was considerable questioning at the police station, and in the end, Amy was compelled to take 3 officers to the Gardner farm, together with the coroner, the medical examiner, and the veterinary who had treated the diseased animals. He went much against his will, for the afternoon was advancing and he feared the fall of night over that accursed place. But it was some comfort to have so many people with him. spreads on everything organic that's been around here, muttered the medical examiner. Don't go out there. There's more to this than we know. Norm said something lived in the well that sucks your life out. He said it must be something that growed from the ball like the one we seen in the meteor stone that fell a year ago June. Sucks and burns, he said, and there's just a cloud of color, like that light out there now. That you can hardly see and you can't tell what it is. Norm thought it feeds on everything living and gets stronger all the time. He said he's seen it this last week. Must be something way off in the sky, like the men from the college last year says the meteor stone was. The way it's made and the way it works ain't like no way God's world. It's somewhere from beyond. No one replied, but the man who had been in the well gave a hint that his long pole must have stirred up something intangible. It was awful, he added. There was no bottom at all, just ooze and bubbles and the feeling of something lurking under there. Amy's horse still pawed and screamed deafeningly in the road outside.
The occasional pop in and pop out of shadows and grass is a little distracting, but once again we return to the well, as was just mentioned.
At this point, the column of unknown color flared suddenly stronger, began to weave itself into fantastic suggestions of shape, which each spectator later described differently. There came from poor Hero such a sound as no man before or since ever heard from a horse. Every person in that low-pitched sitting room stopped his ears, and Amy turned away from the window in horror and nausea. Words could not convey it. When Amy looked out again, the hapless beast lay huddled, inert, on the moonlit ground between the splintered shafts of the buggy. That was the last of Hero till they buried him the next day. But the present was not time to mourn, for almost at this instant, a detective silently called attention to something terrible in the very room with them. In the absence of the lamplight, it was clear that a faint phosphorescence had begun to pervade the entire apartment. It glowed on the broad planked floor and the fragment of the red carpet, and shimmered over the sashes of a small paned window. It ran up and down the exposed corner posts, coruscated about the shelf and mantel, and infected the very doors and furniture. Each minute saw it strengthen, and at last it was very plain that healthy living things must leave that house. When they looked back toward the valley and the distant Gardner place at the bottom, they saw a fearsome sight. All the farm was shining with the hideous unknown blend of color. Trees, buildings, even such grass and herbage as had not been wholly changed to lethal gray brittleness. The boughs were all straining skyward, tipped with tongues of foul flame. Lambent tricklings of the same monstrous fire were creeping about the ridgepoles of the house that bombed their sheds. It was a scene from a vision of Fuseli, and over all the rest reigned that riot of luminous amorphousness, alien, undimensioned rainbow of cryptic poison from the well, seething, healing, lapping, reaching, scintillating, straining, malignly bubbling with cosmic and unrecognizable chromaticism. And without warning, the hideous thing shot vertically upward toward the sky like a rocket or meteor, leaving behind no trail and disappearing through the round, curiously regular hole in the clouds before any man could gasp or cry out.
there was one of the pronunciation errors we talked about, and I think this is the last node, so I think we've made it. Just barely. Maybe we haven't. I'm gonna call this close enough. I thought there was one more. I guess not. And that was The Color Out of Space, as read by Calloused Man? I'll have to look that up. Anyway, I suppose that's it for this episode, and I will catch you later.